Most people have no idea that on the morning of the 18th of May 1980, the entire northern face of a mountain, 1,300 feet of solid rock and glacier, vanished from the face of the earth in less than 8 seconds. Not 8 minutes, not 8 hours, 8 seconds. And what happened next was so catastrophic, so completely beyond anything scientists had ever seen on American soil, that it permanently changed how we understand volcanoes and how we understand death. This is the story of Mount St. Helens, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at a mountain the same way again. Before the 18th of May 1980, Mount St. Helens was considered the most beautiful volcano in the continental United States. People called it the Mount Fuji of America. It sat in the Cascade Range in Washington state, perfectly symmetrical, snow-covered, absolutely breathtaking. Families hiked it. Photographers flew in from across the country just to photograph it. It was postcard perfect. But here's what almost nobody realized. Beneath that beauty was one of the most dangerous geological time bombs on the planet. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano, also known as a composite volcano. Unlike the slow, lava-oozing volcanoes most people imagine, stratovolcanoes build pressure silently, invisibly, for years, and then they don't erupt. They explode. And in the spring of 1980, something started waking up inside that mountain. In March of 1980, small earthquakes began rattling the mountain. Then steam vents opened near the summit. A bulge barely noticeable at first began growing on the mountain's north face. Scientists were called in. A hazard zone was established. Residents were told to evacuate. Most people left, but not everyone. And that decision would cost lives. His name was Harry R. Truman. He was 83 years old, and he had lived at Spirit Lake Lodge right at the base of Mount St. Helens for over 50 years. When authorities ordered everyone out of the danger zone, Harry refused. Flat out refused. He told reporters, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Nobody knows this mountain better than I do, and it's not going to hurt me." Scientists were shocked when they realized the scale of the danger Harry was in, and still on television. He became a folk hero. He went on national television. People sent him fan mail. Kids wrote him letters. He was defiant, charming, and utterly convinced the mountain wouldn't betray him. On the 18th of May 1980, Harry Truman, Spirit Lake Lodge, and everything within a 15-mile radius was buried under 150 feet of volcanic debris. Nobody expected this. Harry's remains have never been found. He is still there, under the mountain, to this day. But Harry's story is only the beginning. At 8:32 a.m. on May 18th, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck directly beneath the mountain. That earthquake triggered what geologists call the largest landslide in recorded human history. The entire north face of the mountain, 0.67 cubic miles of rock, ice, and glacier, detached and began sliding. Now here's where it gets terrifying. That landslide didn't just slide. It moved so fast at up to 150 miles per hour that it depressurized the volcanic system underneath almost instantly. Think of it like uncorking a shaken bottle of champagne, except the bottle is a mountain. What followed was a lateral blast, a sideways explosion that nobody had ever documented on this scale before. Scientists were shocked when their instruments couldn't even measure how fast the pressure wave traveled. It was moving at approximately 670 miles per hour, nearly the speed of sound. Trees, gone. Buildings, gone. Animals, gone. 57 people who had not yet evacuated, gone. This changes everything we know about how we thought volcanic eruptions worked. We always imagined them going, UP. Mount St. Helens went sideways, and that sideways blast covered 230 square miles in seconds. An area larger than the entire city of Chicago flattened in an instant. Let me give you some numbers, because I don't think people truly understand the scale of this. The eruption released energy equivalent to 27,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. Let that sink in. The ash column shot 80,000 feet into the sky. That's 15 miles straight up into the stratosphere. Within 15 minutes, the ash cloud was spreading across 3 states. Within 3 days, Ash had circled the entire globe. 57,000 acres of forest were flattened or scorched. 2 million fish died in rivers choked with ash and boiling water. Thousands of elk, deer, and bears were killed instantly. 200 homes were destroyed. Bridges washed away. Roads vanished under meters of volcanic mud called lahars, rivers of liquid rock and debris that traveled at 50 miles per hour down river valleys. And here's the detail that makes geologists go pale even today. The eruption lowered the mountain summit by 1,313 feet, one of the most recognizable peaks in America just gone. In one morning, scientists were not just observing from a safe distance. David Johnston was a USGS volcanologist stationed at an observation post 6 miles from the summit. He believed the eruption was imminent, and he had been pushing hard for wider evacuation zones. On the morning of May 18th, at 8:32 a.m., David Johnston reportedly radioed back to his colleagues with these final words: "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it." Nobody expected this. David Johnston, one of the most brilliant young volcanologists in America, was killed instantly by the lateral blast. He was 30 years old. His body was never found either. But his warning, those final words, became iconic because he was right. He had been right all along, and he died proving it. His death wasn't in vain. The observation data collected before and during the eruption completely transformed how scientists monitor volcanoes worldwide. The early warning systems we use today, the evacuation protocols, the monitoring stations on every major volcano from Alaska to Indonesia. David Johnston's work is baked into all of it. Here's something almost nobody talks about. After the eruption, scientists expected the blast zone to remain a dead wasteland for decades, maybe centuries. The landscape looked like the surface of the moon: gray, lifeless, scorched. But within weeks, something extraordinary began happening. Gophers. Of all things, pocket gophers that had been underground during the eruption survived. They began tunneling through the ash, bringing up old soil, mixing in nutrients. Then plants started growing not from seeds blown in from outside, but from root systems that had survived underground. Elk came back, then wolves, then birds, then everything else. This changes everything we know about ecological recovery. Scientists studying Mount St. Helens today say the recovery happened in a completely different order and far faster than any ecological model had predicted. It rewrote the textbooks on how ecosystems rebuild after catastrophic events. The mountain didn't just change volcanology, it changed biology, it changed ecology, it changed emergency management, it changed everything. Now I want you to think about something. What if Mount St. Helens had erupted just a few decades later? What if it happened today? In 1980, about 57 people died. 57, which is already a tragedy. But here's the thing, the area around Mount St. Helens in 1980 was relatively rural. The authorities had weeks of warning and most people got out. But now think about this. The Cascade Volcanic Arc, the same chain of mountains that Mount St. Helens belongs to, runs through Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And sitting along that same chain are other volcanoes. Mount Rainier, 14,410 feet tall, sitting 59 miles from downtown Seattle, home to more glacial ice than any other peak in the lower 48 states. If Mount Rainier produced a lahar, a volcanic mud flow on the scale of what Mount St. Helens produced, it would travel down river valleys that are now home to over 80,000 people. Towns, suburbs, highways, airports, all sitting directly in lahar paths that scientists have mapped. FEMA has identified Mount Rainier as potentially the most dangerous volcano in the United States. Not the most explosive, the most dangerous because of where it sits and how many people live downstream. And if something like the 1,980 eruption of Mount St. Helens happened at Mount Rainier today, scientists estimate the death toll could reach into the tens of thousands before a single drop of lava even appeared. What if the warning was shorter? What if there was no warning? What if the lateral blast went in a different direction toward a populated valley instead of a forested wilderness? At Mount St. Helens, the blast went north, into wilderness. If it had gone south toward Portland, we might be talking about one of the deadliest natural disasters in American history. And here's what should really keep you up at night: Yellowstone. Mount St. Helens was powerful, devastating, historic, but Yellowstone sitting beneath Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho is what volcanologists call a supervolcano, and its last full eruption was 640,000 times more powerful than Mount St. Helens, 640,000 times. Scientists don't think a Yellowstone supereruption is imminent, but they also said Mount St. Helens wouldn't erupt the way it did. Nobody expected this. Today, Mount St. Helens looks nothing like the majestic peak that stood there before the 18th of May 1980. The summit is a jagged, hollowed-out crater. A new lava dome has been slowly growing inside it for decades. Forests have reclaimed the blast zone. Spirit Lake is back shimmering and clear, though still filled with logs blown in from the eruption. And Harry Truman is still there, somewhere under all of it. The eruption of Mount St. Helens was the deadliest and most economically destructive volcanic event in the history of the United States. It caused over $1 billion in damage in 1980 money. It shut down the Columbia River shipping lane. It grounded aircraft across the Northwest. It dumped ash on cities hundreds of miles away. But here's what I keep coming back to. The mountain still exists. It's still active. Steam still vents from the crater. The lava dome is still growing slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. And somewhere deep beneath the surface, magma is still moving. The volcano didn't die on the 18th of May 1980. It exhaled. It reset. And it is still, right now. As you're watching this video alive, we didn't tame it. We didn't defeat it. We just got out of the way. And the most terrifying, most humbling, most mind-blowing thing about Mount St. Helens is that it reminded us that no matter how advanced we become, no matter how many satellites we put in orbit or sensors we plant in the ground, we are still living on a planet that operates on its own schedule. Not ours. If this video changed the way you think about the ground beneath your feet, share it with someone who needs to see it. Because the mountain isn't done yet.